Hello, you're with BBC News Live. I'm Nicky, Schiller, and very shortly we will be taking you live to Monaco, where the Prince of Wales, Prince William, is going to give a speech to environmentalists and crucially investors on what is World Oceans Day. He is going to urge more to be done to protect the world's oceans. In the last few minutes, the Prince has arrived at the venue, and we can go there live to our correspondent Pierre-Antoine Denis. So Pierre-Antoine, the Prince and the President Macron just arrived. What are we expecting to happen in the next few minutes?
Yeah, Nicky. So yeah, you can see just behind me, this is where they all had this family photo just moments ago. All morning, all the 20 leaders or so have arrived. All the presidents and heads of states were here in Monaco for the kind of the last real hurdle of this economy forum. This is all preambles to the main United Nations conference on ocean protection and ocean conservation that is going to start tomorrow on Monday. So when it comes to this part of the event, this Blue Economy Forum that Prince William is attending, we're going to hear from him in a short while. He's going to talk about how the importance of acting now. He's saying in the middle of this crucial decade for climate change, it's very, very important that we need to act now. He's going to call for action. He's going to call for investment. There are many people from the private sector here in attendance today, and they're expecting William to directly address them, CEOs and CFOs, to try and say, look, this is the time to foot the bill, because the ocean is our most crucial resources when it comes to fighting climate change, and it is time for everyone to take that into consideration.
Yeah, we've been seeing pictures of the Prince along with the President Macron and Prince Albert of Monaco. As you make that point, Pierre, he's going to be addressing not just the environmentalists, because the investors, and that's what matters in some ways, it's getting money into the projects that can help save the oceans.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicky. It's estimated, according to several reports, that around $1 billion, more or less, is invested into the ocean, into preserving it, into helping the transition to a more sustainable fisheries, fighting plastic pollution, and so on and so forth. But the scientists that I've been speaking to are all quite alarmed by the fact that this is nowhere near enough. They're saying to actually get to the level that needs to be reached, we should have around $15 billion. So this is actually the time to foot the bill, according to these leaders that are here today, and they will be here throughout the conference. And we've been speaking and seeing actually quite a few investors talking about their innovations, talking about what they could do to help vulnerable nations who are already seeing the brunt of climate change. But it's, for some nations, it already seems like a little too late. Some Pacific nations, for instance, are already thinking about where to relocate in the event of climate change, because of the sea level rise already being a reality for them. They're already drawing plans on where to go next as climate refugees. So that gives you an idea of the emergency and the urgency around it. But to counter that point, how do you do so when your big partner, your big emitter of carbon emissions, is also the big wallet, the United States, is no longer here, because Donald Trump has famously called climate change a hoax?
Pierre-Antoine Denis, for the moment, thank you very much. That's Pierre-Antoine, who is in Monaco. As I said, we are expecting Prince William to start that speech in the next 15 minutes or so. We will take you back live to Monaco as soon as he does. Travelling with him is our senior royal correspondent, Daniela Relf, and she's been giving us an idea of what we might hear the Prince say today.
Prince William due to arrive here in Monaco later on this morning, and this speech that he is giving here to the Blue Economy and Finance Forum is being billed by his team as a landmark speech, a key speech in terms of William's development in this environment space and as a global statesman. And what he will tell the audience here is that we are now in a decisive decade. He will really put the pressure on in terms of doing more. He's going to talk about urgency and action around doing more to protect the world's oceans. He's going to be addressing a crowd who are full of environmentalists, scientists, but also crucially investors, people that have the money to invest in oceans projects. And that's very much why William is here, to try and put a little bit of pressure on, to try and bring people together, bring people into the room who can perhaps invest some money in these vast ocean projects, which can be a bit of a hard sell sometimes. So William very much here, we are told, to use his platform to try to generate some financial financial input and make change.
Yeah, businesses, presidents will all be there. And you were talking about sort of getting investment. Of course, this is something that he's done quite successfully with the Earthshot Prize that he founded.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, the official reason he's here isn't just because he's Prince of Wales, but because he is the founder of that Earthshot Prize. And there'll be several past winners of that £1 million prize here in Monaco today as part of the team with William to try to explain what can be done around oceans protection. But that Earthshot Prize has definitely given him a voice when it comes to the environment. It was his father, the King, of course, who very much introduced climate change and environmental issues into conversation, into the mainstream. And I think William now sees very much that it is his role to try and actually bring about real change. He will talk about time running out and having to do things while we can today. So his message is very much about trying to make change now and to try and bring some money into ocean protection.
What we can expect from Prince William in this speech, which is due very shortly in Monaco. We've seen the live pictures of people already addressing the environmentalists and, crucially, as we've been hearing, the investors that are there in Monaco. But Prince William has also been talking to the legendary environmental broadcaster, Sir David Attenborough, and he's been talking about the damage caused by some fishing practices. And our climate editor, Justin Rolat, has been to one fishing port in Scotland to find out more.
When you put it on.
You won't get it off, David.
Sir David was speaking to Prince William last month at the premiere of his new documentary, Ocean.
The ocean is our planet's life support system. Yet it's but a crossroads.
The film contains vivid new images of the impact of bottom trawling and dredging. The two fishing methods involve boats dragging weighted nets across the sea floor.
The awful thing is that it's hidden from you and from me and from most people. The thing which I am appalled by when I first saw the shots that were taken for this film are what we have done to the deep ocean floor is just unspeakably awful. I mean, if you did anything remotely like it on land, everybody would be up in arms.
More than a third of the seas around the UK have protected status, but 90% of those protected areas allow bottom trawling or dredging to take place. The fishing industry says conservation needs to be balanced against the requirement to produce food.
You can't have any form of food production without some kind of impact. And actually producing food from our seas is far more efficient in terms of greenhouse gas emissions than producing food from the land.
The UN hopes leaders at the conference in France will agree a treaty that dramatically increases the protection given to the ocean. Sir David hopes his new documentary will increase public support for action.
If it just shifts public awareness, it'll be very, very important. And I can only hope that people who see it will recognise that something must be done before we destroy this great treasure.
The UN conference begins on Monday. Justin Rolat, BBC News.
So we are expecting Prince William to address this conference that is taking place in Monaco very shortly. Joining me to listen to what Prince William has to say is Henna Hundle. Now, she has been to a number of these UN climate conferences, so she knows what's going on. Henna, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News Live. We heard in Justin's report about some of the problems. Just how bad is it when it comes to our oceans at the moment?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate having this discussion with you. You know, I think we are in, forgive my pun, a watershed moment when it comes to ocean protection, conservation, and sustainable development. We are in the midst right now of what's called the Ocean Decade. So in 2017, the UN General Assembly declared that this would be the ocean decade, where we need to really get serious about ramping up our scientific knowledge to protect the oceans. We have so many problems ranging from ocean acidification, plastic pollution, overfishing, and of course, ocean warming, which is really devastating many island communities and coastal populations. So I think it's absolutely critical that we get serious about this issue right now. And that's why I'm looking forward to the outcomes of the conference.
How is it affecting communities? Because for some people in the world, it can seem quite abstract, but for others, it really is affecting them right now.
Absolutely. Here's what we know. We know that the sea levels are rising and the rate of that rise is picking up. Why? Well, 2/3 of that rate of that rise picking up is actually deemed to be due to thermal expansion. And so the oceans are actually absorbing around 90% of the excess heat from the greenhouse gases that are being trapped in the atmosphere. And so that is devastating for marine life ecosystems, as well as for populations that live on coastlines that rely on being able to fish for their economies. We also know that plastic pollution is a huge problem. And actually, there are many health impacts for communities that rely primarily on fish for their diets that are actually absorbing these plastics. So there are numerous impacts all across the board.
And what can we do individually to help this?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. A lot of what's actually going to help this issue will come from the top down, from governments, the private sector, philanthropic organizations, academic institutions, scientists convening at these conferences. But from an individual level, number one, keeping this issue at the top of our radar. I think voting in people who are actually going to solve this problem and not let it be a back burner issue. I think also, to plastic pollution, which I mentioned earlier, I've been very heartened by the number of cleanups you see, ocean plastic cleanups taking place all across the world. And so I think that's a way that people can really participate in keeping our oceans clean and safe and hopefully, really tamp down on this problem.
That's all well and good, but in the end, does it not all come down to what America does? And we have President Trump in the White House who has been talking about drill, baby, drill.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, because when I was at the UN Climate Change Conference last year, of course, the atmosphere was very sobered by the realization that President Trump would be coming back into office and would likely be undoing a lot of former President Biden's climate legacy. And we've certainly watched that play out. But at the same time, I think it's really important to not lose hope, to not pretend that the whole future of climate action rests on the political whims of one certain country. I mean, this is a global movement, and I think it would dishonor the great work of activists and governments all across the world who are actually continuing to fight this issue without missing a beat. And so I think keeping the focus there is really important, despite, of course, the fact that, in the US, the state of play is not looking good right now regarding climate action.
And how important is it that we hear from someone like Prince William on this issue?
I think Prince William has a great deal of credibility on this issue, as well as his father. They have been involved in environmental initiatives for so long. When I was at the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt a couple of years ago, we saw King Charles make an appearance there and talk about the importance of this issue. So I think his credibility that he lends to this problem is very useful in really adding another layer of visibility. So I'm looking forward to his remarks.
You've been going to these UN conferences over the years. Are you optimistic that we are going to be able to save the oceans?
I think we have to be optimistic. It's hard not to be when you're in these environments and you see people from all across the world convening year after year, bringing solutions to the table, involving people from the private sector, from philanthropic organizations, indigenous peoples. It's really inspiring to be in an atmosphere like that. And so I think I always do maintain a seed of hope. At the same time, I do try to be realistic and clear-eyed about our current prospects, which, as we've been talking about, are not great, especially coming from an American perspective right now. But I think we have to remember that this fight is so much bigger. And, although we might not see it all the time, there are many people working behind the scenes on this issue. And I think that's, an opportunity at these conferences to really highlight that work.
Henna, do stay with us, because very shortly we are expecting Prince William to address this conference in Monaco, coming on World Oceans Day. We are seeing people gather there ready to hear what the Prince says. Just see the Prince coming into the room in Monaco. So we will be hearing from him very shortly to hear what he has to say on this World Oceans Day. You're live with BBC News, and we are going to take you straight to Monaco, where the Prince of Wales, Prince William, is about to give a speech at a conference on what is World Oceans Day. And he is going to talk to both environmentalists and also, crucially, investors about what he believes can be done to save the world's oceans. We've seen the Prince arriving at the venue. We're expecting him to speak at the Blue Economy and Finance Forum very shortly. He is there actually as the founder of the Earthshot Environmental Prize, which of course looks for solutions to the world's climate changes. Now, his team have already described this speech as a landmark speech where he will urge both environmentalists and investors to work together to protect our oceans. Let's bring in our reporter, Pierre-Antoine Denis, who is also in Monaco. We're waiting for Prince William to arrive. Pierre, what are we expecting him to say? And indeed, who else is at this conference?
Yeah, Nicky. So we're waiting for him to speak. Of course, is going to be in a few minutes' time. Now we've been having hearing from speeches from different heads of states all morning and also yesterday as well on Saturday, both in Nice, the stage of the conference next week, and here in Monaco at this Blue Economy Forum, as you said, really focused on the investment side of the issue. We're also going to be hearing from the president of Costa Rica, who is co-chairing this conference with France. We're also going to hear about the from the Brazilian president Lula da Silva, and we're going to hear as well from the French president Emmanuel Macron, who will be also speaking and addressing both these environmentalists and the CEOs of this conference, because of course the real key here, as you said, is all of the money. How do we get a sense of momentum around climate finance? But when it comes to the ocean, quite a bit of money is already
I'm going to interrupt you because Prince William is now approaching the stage. So let's have a listen in to the Prince of Wales as he addresses this a forum in Monaco.
Bonjour, c'est un plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui pour aborder un sujet important qui me tient à cœur. We come together today, united by our deep connection to the ocean and our concern for its safety. For many of us, it is a place where some of our happiest memories are made, where we've explored the wonders of the natural world, and we have all relied on its great abundance for our food and livelihoods. And yet, all too often, it can feel distant and disconnected from our everyday lives, allowing us to forget just how vital it really is. The truth is that healthy oceans are essential to all life on Earth. They generate half of the world's oxygen, regulate our climate, and provide food for more than 3 billion people. And today, they need our help. Rising sea temperatures, plastic pollution, and overfishing are putting pressure on these fragile ecosystems and on the people and communities who depend most upon them. What once seemed an abundant resource is diminishing before our eyes. We all stand to be impacted, and we are all responsible for change, both negative and positive. But there remains time to turn this tide. Together, we have signed up to an ambitious global commitment to protect 30% of land and sea by 2030. It is our best chance of reversing the damage done to our planet and restoring its well-being. But the clock is ticking. 2030 is fast approaching, and only 17% of land and just 3% of the ocean has been fully protected. If we are to reach our goal, we urgently need to take bold action to protect and restore our planet. We must realize the potential of the blue economy for our ecosystems, our economies, and our communities. With creativity, ingenuity, investment, and support, we can unlock exciting innovations and solutions that protect our planet, create jobs, sustain livelihoods, and encourage prosperity. This challenge is like none that we have faced before. But I remain an optimist. I believe that urgency and optimism have the power to bring about the action needed to change the course of history. I'm an optimist because, as the founder of the Earthshot Prize, I see the incredible examples of the ideas, innovations, and technologies that are harnessing the power of the ocean whilst protecting its vitality. Individuals, organizations, and businesses from every corner of the world are stepping up to play their part. And I'm delighted that 3 of them are here with us today. Take Sam and Gator, the founders of Coral Vita and 2021 winners of the Earthshot Prize. Their team are pioneering high-tech methods to grow coral up to 50 times faster than in nature and improve their resilience to the impact of climate change. After winning the Earthshot Prize, they have financed a major restoration project off the coast of Grand Bahama, working with local community experts to grow more than 20,000 corals. They are now focusing on expanding their fast-growing corals across new geographies, driving tourism to areas with fresh coral reef. Or Douglas, the founder of MyAlgae and an Earthshot Prize finalist last year. His work in the last 6 months to end reliance on wild-caught fish as a primary source of omega-3 has saved 2.4 million wild fish, recycled enough wastewater to fill 300 Olympic swimming pools, and prevented vast amounts of CO2 emissions. Just 1 ton of their algae produces as much omega-3 as 620,000 fish. MyAlgae isn't just alternative nutrition. It's climate technology, it's ocean conservation, and it's sustainable food systems at scale. And Enrique of Pristine Seas, a 2021 Earthshot Prize finalist and pioneer in marine protected areas. He is a powerful advocate for the clear scientific benefits of MPAs. When communities protect marine areas, fish stocks recover, ocean health improves, and there is an increase in profits for the neighbouring communities. Pristine Seas has already helped establish 29 of the largest MPAs in the world that cover an area over twice the size of India. Enrique is also part of the team behind Sir David Attenborough's incredible new film. It makes the most compelling argument for immediate action that I have ever seen. Watching human activity reduce beautiful sea forests to barren deserts at the base of our oceans is simply heartbreaking. For many, it is an urgent wake-up call to just what is going on in our oceans. But it can no longer be a matter of out of sight, out of mind. The need to act to protect our ocean is now in full view. As ever, Sir David leaves us with a sense of optimism that all is not lost. He believes change is possible. Put simply, the ocean is under enormous threat, but it can revive itself. But only if together we act now. The actions of Earthshot Prize finalists like Enrique, Douglas, Sam and Gator are proof that we can collectively rise to the global challenge of reviving our oceans. The Earthshot Prize is here to demonstrate that humanity does have the tools needed, but the brilliant minds behind these inspiring solutions cannot do it alone. They need scaling, they need support and investment to reach their potential. And they need to be backed by ambitious action on a global, national and local level. Halfway through this decisive decade, I call on all of you to think big in your actions. Let us act together with urgency and optimism while we still have the chance. For the future of our planet, for the future generations, we must listen to the words of Sir David Attenborough. If we save the sea, we save our world. Merci encore de me recevoir ici aujourd'hui. Maintenant, c'est le moment de passer à l'action. Passez un excellent après-midi. Merci.
So there we have the Prince of Wales, Prince William, addressing that conference in Monaco on World Oceans Day. He talked about how the truth is that healthy oceans are essential to all life on Earth, and said today they need our help. He said what once seemed an abundant resource is diminishing before our eyes. He said we all stand to be impacted and we are all responsible for change, both negative and positive. But he did say there remains time to turn the tide. He talked about it was a challenge like none that we have faced before. But he did say he remained optimistic. He said, I believe that urgency and optimism have the power to bring about the action needed to change the course of history. And he talked about some of the people who have been involved in his Earthshot Prize, how they are helping. But he also talked about how he called on everyone to think big in their actions, saying, let us together with urgency and optimism act while we still have the chance. And he ended there on the words of Sir David Attenborough, the legendary environmental broadcaster, saying, if we save the sea, we save our world. Now, addressing the conference at the moment is the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva. Let us talk to our reporter Pierre-Antoine Denis, who was listening to what the Prince of Wales had to say. And Pierre-Antoine, I was struck by how he did make this very personal about how we all need to act now to save the oceans.
Yes, exactly. It was all about this shared responsibility, wasn't it? About the common goal that we all have. There was also this positive note around the innovation that he is a part of, that he's really looking after with the Earthshot Prize that he is a chair of. And we've seen all across his speech the mix of responsibility, urgency, but also optimism, as the situation is clear according to his word. You know, we this is a challenge like none that we've ever faced before. We really have this goal together. What once seemed an abundant resource is diminishing before our eyes. You know, looking at the idea that there is an urgency. When you look also at another quote that really struck to me, the clock is ticking. 2030 is fast approaching, and only 3% of the ocean has been fully protected. And that, as you know, and we've been discussing, Nicky, it has huge impact, especially when it comes to international waters and the high seas where lawlessness is still prime.
It is interesting that at this conference, it's not just the environmentalists, but it's the men and women with money who can help. So Prince William also talking to them today to try and get investment in these projects that he's been championing with his Earthshot Prize.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicky. And one of the reasons why as well is this is important to speak to, you know, CEOs and just the people with the money, as you said, Nicky, is because the climate change impact already has a really, really heavy bill. When you look at some of the global losses from tropical storms and floods, it's over $100 billion in 2023, and it's rising by 25% each decade. It does impact 560 million people who are exposed annually. It's also interesting to see that within this conference this weekend and all across next week are really high level CEOs of insurance companies, because the insurance costs are rising for maritime activities. You have how the premiums have rose 5% to over $30 billion, you know, driven by this geopolitical tension, the increased risks. And so you're seeing how it's important to find common solutions for the future, because it's looking like the bill is just getting more and more big, just getting bigger and bigger each year. And it's about trying to find this innovation and these solutions that Prince William has talked about in this speech, because they will be the key to the to finding solutions to this common problem.
Yeah, we're talking about the speech that Prince William has given, but as you rightly point out, there is a UN Oceans Conference which is going on in Nice this week. 50 world leaders are there, but crucially, President Trump not there. And we've been talking about this. In the end, what America does matters, doesn't it, Pierre-Antoine?
Oh, it absolutely matters. Just to give you sort of like a real example of the daily change for some of the nations that have been impacted, to Donald Trump deciding to completely pulling out of the the climate accords that have been signed in Paris for the second time. He did exactly so the same when he came to the White House and first time. To give you an idea, so I spoke earlier, the president of Palau. Palau is a really small group of islands in the Pacific. And he was telling me about basically how there are in his nation different organizations who are relying on climate aid that are backed by the UN, but behind the UN is obviously the United States. And with Donald Trump freezing some of these fundings, these organizations are now no longer able to do the kind of work they're doing, which is mapping the island, researching, trying to prevent the next major event. All of this isn't happening anymore. And he was telling me about how actually all of a sudden you realize the dependence that these nations have towards one single nation. So they have been calling on both the United States to try and change their position. The UN has invited John Kerry, the former special envoy for the climate under Joe Biden, to try and change a little bit the narrative, to try and put a bit of pressure on the White House. The many mayors were here over the weekend from the United States to say, locally, we are doing things, but without Donald Trump and without consensus and movement from the White House, it will be very hard to see how any talks that will be done here will be able to be implemented in the long run, and will be, as more importantly, be able to be funded. And even if you involve different actors, will also be carbon emitters like China or India.
Pierre-Antoine, stay with us. I want to bring in Henna Hundal, who has been a delegate to a number of UN climate conferences. She'll be there at the one that's taking place in Brazil later this year. Henna, what did you make of what Prince William had to say in his speech?
You know, I was really struck by his sense of optimism that coursed throughout the duration of the speech. And I think part of what undergirds that for him personally is his involvement in solution-oriented projects. When we look at, for example, the Earthshot Prize, that is all about mobilizing people around the world for solutions. And if you actually take a look at the website and look at some of the finalists, for example, it's really inspiring to see a lot of young people looking within their own communities and finding solutions there that can then be adapted and translated at scale. And so I think his really involvement in the solutions for the crisis, for climate change at large, as well as for different environmental projects, and certainly for the oceans, really undergirds that optimism that we heard throughout the speech. But I think it was really important as well to hear how much he wanted people to act urgently and how he really put that deadline of 2030 front and center.
Yeah, one of the projects he talked about was Pristine Seas, which is a pioneer in marine protected areas. It's helped to establish 29 of those, which cover an area over twice the size of India. How important are marine protected areas?
Marine protected areas are incredibly important, not only for the local marine life, but also for the populations that rely on these areas for their local economies. I mean, I think what was also interesting about Prince William's speech is that he talked about the importance of the quote unquote blue economy, understanding that it doesn't just make sense to protect the oceans from a love for environmentalism, but also for the realization that the health of our economies are so interconnected with the oceans. And that's something that we often don't appreciate. And so I think his speech was really flowing with not only an appeal to ethos and logos, but also pathos, and being able to really tie in all of those elements is really important for, you know, his work currently, which is bringing investors on board to this problem, which historically is very difficult to do, to get the private sector to acknowledge not only the important role that they can play in this issue, but how they might even be able to see a return. So being able to frame those issues is really important and difficult in many ways. And I think he did a good job of doing that in this speech.
Yeah, there was that line that it was about creating jobs, sustaining livelihoods and encouraging prosperity. So aiming it at the economic point of view of protecting the oceans.
Right. And I think that's critical, you know, at this moment in time where we've been talking about, you know, the United States taking a back seat on these matters and the field being wide open, there being this open vacuum for other countries to get on board. On the one hand, I've been concerned about this creating kind of a permission structure for the other big players to step back. But I think what Prince William very smartly was trying to do was frame this as an area of grand economic opportunity, which hopefully could actually motivate different actors to step up to the plate. And so I think, his way of framing all these issues is right on board with the type of messaging that we need right now to fall upon receptive ears.
Hannah, stay with us, because if you are just joining us here on BBC News Live, we've been listening to a speech by the Prince of Wales, Prince William, in Monaco. And here is a taste of what he had to say to the delegates.
Watching human activity reduce beautiful sea forests to barren deserts at the base of our oceans is simply heartbreaking. For many, it is an urgent wake-up call to just what is going on in our oceans. But it can no longer be a matter of out of sight, out of mind. The need to act to protect our ocean is now in full view. As ever, Sir David leaves us with a sense of optimism that all is not lost. He believes change is possible. Put simply, the ocean is under enormous threat, but it can revive itself. But only if together we act now. The actions of Earthshot Prize finalists like Enrique, Douglas, Sam and Gator are proof that we can collectively rise to the global challenge of reviving our oceans. The Earthshot Prize is here to demonstrate that humanity does have the tools needed, but the brilliant minds behind these inspiring solutions cannot do it alone. They need scaling, they need support and investment to reach their potential. And they need to be backed by ambitious action on a global, national and local level. Halfway through this decisive decade, I call on all of you to think big in your actions. Let us act together with urgency and optimism while we still have the chance. For the future of our planet, for the future generations, we must listen to the words of Sir David Attenborough. If we save the sea, we save our world. Merci encore de me recevoir ici aujourd'hui. Maintenant, c'est le moment de passer à l'action. Passez un excellent après-midi. Merci.
So there we have some of Prince William ending with some comments in French, still joined by Henna Hundal, who has been a delegate to UN climate conferences and will be going later this year in Brazil. The Prince trying to end on an optimistic note, but during that he also spoke about human activity, quote, reducing swathes of undersea forestry to barren deserts. That is a pretty stark image.
Right. He had some very powerful language in there. I think one line that particularly struck me was this notion that, the oceans are under grave threat, but they can revive themselves. And I think one thing that's particularly underappreciated is that the oceans are such a dynamic, resilient ecosystem. They absorb 31% of CO2 emissions, 91% of the heat from greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And so they really function as a safety net for the planet. But of course, that can only come to a certain point where we reach that critical mass. And so I think he's really highlighting that there is so much hope because of, quite frankly, just the dynamic nature of this ecosystem. But we have to make sure not to get too big for our britches. And we have until 2030 to really do that.
Are you optimistic about that 2030 deadline?
That's a great question. I try to come from a place of optimism, much like Prince William. But I think, working in this space, there has to be an element of realism there. And I think, quite frankly, at this point in time, a few months into the second presidency of Donald Trump and seeing just how much he has made rolling back these key environmental initiatives part of his agenda, much more so, I would say, than even during his first term in office. My optimism has certainly been a bit tempered. He's really steamrolled onward with his anti-climate action agenda, much more so than I think a lot of us were anticipating. We knew, of course, he wasn't a pro-climate action president, but it's really been disheartening to see how much a lot of this stuff has been rolled back. So I think I approach this now with cautious optimism.
Henna Hundal, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News Live. I just want to nip back to Monaco and our reporter Pierre-Antoine Denis, who is there. Pierre-Antoine, just outline what we're going to see later today. We can still see that delegates are speaking at this conference, and indeed the following days at this UN conference that's taking place in Nice.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, Nikki, so once this wraps up, the different leaders who are here will then head to Nice, 20 kilometers away from here. There will be different visits and official moments there, and before they're then all hosted by Emmanuel Macron for a state dinner ahead of the conference that will kickstart on Monday in Nice, and that will start with speech from all the delegates who are present here in turn, just like as you would see.
Oh, we just seem to have lost the connection
to
to
try-
Pierre-Antoine Denis, but he is there at Monaco listening to what the Prince of Wales had to say. I'll end with the words that he said: "For our future of our planet, for the future generations, we must listen to the words of Sir David Attenborough." He, of course, the legendary environmental broadcaster. He says, "If we save the sea, we save our world." So you've been with us here on BBC News Live as we've been listening to Prince William addressing that conference in Monaco. Don't forget, you can get much more on that and what Prince William has said on the BBC News website and app. You are with BBC News Live.